Welcome everyone to, I don't even know what number it is, all I know is it's the 16th of September and apparently we're getting close to the last official day of summer, if it's not already happened. Time is one of those surreal things at the moment. So this morning we're going to be talking about surviving and thriving. Paula will give us a little update because things have been changing. There have been changes over the weekend and coming into effect on Monday. So Paula's going to give an update on that. Then I think we're coming to me to do a little bit of update about working together, and then Julie is going to round up with some information about funding. So without further ado, I am going to now mute myself and hand over to Paula, and I'll speak to you all again soon.
So hello everybody. I think that highlighted that it's quite difficult for us to hear ourselves, whether there's any problems with our microphones. So if at any point our sound does alter or crackle, please don't hesitate to give us a wave and let us know there's a problem your end. Okay, morning everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with me. So as Anita said, we know that there has been some government updates, and more than anything, I think it's caused a little bit of confusion to people about exactly what those changes mean, particularly for community buildings and for village halls. So the legislation came out on Monday, and we didn't really want to give too much guidance other than signposting you to the multi-purpose community buildings update that went out last week from the government. But now that legislation is out and we've had a chance to have a look at it, we're able to give you some further guidance. So the first change was to do with the rule of 6. Now the rule of 6, oh, I'm sorry. I just tried to admit somebody and it jumped to the next slide. The rule of 6 is based around people living in one household. Now, if there are more than 6 people living in that household, they don't have to kick anybody out. They're able to still be counted as a household and still fall under the rule of 6, even if there's more of them. If you've taken a single person into your household and created a bubble and that number has gone over 6, that's still acceptable within the rule of 6. But if you are meeting other people, then it cannot exceed 6. So even if your household goes over 6, that means you can't meet with other people as a whole household. If you're a household of 4, you can meet with 2 other people and socially distance. So we can see, I think, why there is some confusion from people about exactly what the rule of 6 means, because there is quite a few little bits of variation that sit around the rule of 6, which I think makes it feel less like a rule and a little bit more like a number as a guide. The main thing I think to take away is to think of a household. So the people that you live with are the only people that you're supposed to have close physical contact with. Anybody outside of the people that you live with, you should be socially distancing from. So how does that work then in a community building? Well, the way it works in a community building is you are still allowed to work to your hall capacity with social distancing of 2 meters or 1 meter with mitigation, for example, face masks. So you are still allowed to follow all of the health and safety guidance given by ACRE that you've been following up to this point. The difference will be that within those groups that you have, the individual groups who are allowed to be close to one another mustn't exceed that rule of 6, or as I said, a household or a bubble household. So they can't exceed those. So to give an example, let's say that you were doing a bingo night and there were individual tables. You could have the capacity that your building can have, so let's say 30 in that building, but each of those table groups could not exceed the household number, 6, or whatever that household number is, and a bubble. Okay, so think of it that way. So a household. So individual people sitting at tables. If it's going to be a random group where everybody who turns up is an individual, then they would all need to be socially distanced within the capacity of your hall. So in effect, nothing has changed apart from the size of those individual groups of people that might book to come into the hall. So the guidance that you have already is the guidance that you should still be following. And ACRE have been really, really keen to emphasise that point within all of their notifications. And we will be making sure that today that we tweet out that message from ACRE, really emphasising that point. So if you're having conversations with hirers who are now reluctant to hire, if you can clarify with them that actually not a great deal has changed, it's just the individual groups that might book to come and do the activity. So for example, take a restaurant can't seat a group bigger than 6 unless that group informs them that they are all one household, so family of 2 adults and 5 children, for example. Or that they have a single person who has joined their bubble, such as one elderly parent who is single and living alone. And remember, those bubbles were created to try and prevent isolation. So the other important bit, which I think again has caused some confusion, that came out in the legislation, not in the guidance, was this word mingling. Mingling, as far as I'm aware, has never been used in a rule of law before. So it's a brand new legal term that we have to contend with. But mingling means what it's always meant, which is people crowding around together, grouping together and interconnecting. So if you think of mingling as breaking social distancing, I think it makes it easier. And in that way, it's also easy to see that it hasn't changed. We weren't supposed to be mingling before outside of the allowed groups that we could meet with. And the same is true now. So if 2 groups of 6 turn up for an event, they have to stay and remain in their group. They can't wander over to another table to have a chat with them. They can't swap places. And none of that was allowed before or encouraged before. In pubs, they've told people to stay where they are, to stay within the group that they arrive with, not to swap tables and chairs. So it's the same ruling, it's just that it's been put into law. I think it is going to cause confusion because people won't be completely sure what the word means. But if we think of it as that breaking your household groups and starting to interact with other people at a non-safe distance, then I think we can begin to see what mingling means. And hall capacity hasn't changed. That is still the defining factor for how large a group you are allowed to have in your hall. It's how many you can safely have under 2 metre guidance and 1 metre with mitigation. And the ruling around face coverings also didn't change. So again, on entrance, exit, anywhere where you cannot have 2 metres between people, there has to be face coverings. For the individual hirers, they will need to look at the legislation and the working safely guidance for their particular activity to ensure whether they know in their risk assessment whether face covering is required. So sport activity, face coverings are still not required. For activities that fall under the banner of education, face coverings are still not required. So that will be individual hirers looking. If you've got a hirer that's struggling, please don't hesitate to signpost them to us and we'll see if we can help them in finding the right guidance for them. But we can only signpost really to where that guidance might be. We can't unfortunately give the guidance because it's very specific to particular activities, but we possibly can signpost you. Working safely guidance is still available and has been updated on contact centres, hospitality. So all of those can still be found on the government website. And the multi-purpose community buildings guidance has also been updated. And on these slides, those links will be there for you to click on. I'll also put in a link to the new legislation if you haven't seen it, but I would say to people to act with caution when looking at the legislation because it is an update to the previous legislation. So an awful lot of it is talking about words replacing the words from the original legislation. So it's not particularly easy to follow, but it does talk through the rule of 6, so it's worth having a look at it for that reason. We know that there are going to be more and more questions that come up around this. We are expecting them. Please do use the inquiry and the help, our inquiry form and the helpline if you do have further questions. But there isn't anything within the new update that should prevent halls that were planning to open to continue to open. And we hope that you'll take some reassurance from that. We will, of course, be coming back to this at later dates as more information comes to light. We're also hoping that some local funds might become available to help halls that might be struggling because their numbers are going to be lower than they anticipated. So if you are one of those halls and you're worried about that, you're worried about your finances in any way, shape or form, or a community building, please do get in contact with us and we will see how we can signpost you for support. Because we do know that for some groups, this could have an impact on the numbers that they can let in, which will affect the amount of money that they're able to raise from the hiring of their hall. Okay, the next significant update that came through at the end of last week was to do with the NHS Test and Trace app. So they've brought out a QR code. Now, QR code is one of those strange blocks that has like a, strange squares that has like a barcode-y look to it that you can scan with your phone. Anybody who downloads the NHS Test and Trace app will be able to link onto those QR codes with their phone by scanning them and instantly register into a building. So if you're putting together test and trace registration notification, this could be a really good shortcut. Now, in the short term, I think very few people will have the app on their phone. So you're going to need probably pen and paper as a backup resource to take people's contact details. But as the app becomes more commonplace, then of course, this is going to be the main way people register to come into a building. By using the link below, which will be on these slides, it'll take you straight through to register. You register your premises and then you receive a unique QR code which you can print out and put up as a poster. And then people literally come into your premises, scan, and it will be held by NHS Test and Trace, their contact details in case of an outbreak. This means that you no longer have to hold and store information or try and erase it after 21 days because the app will do that automatically. If you are carrying on doing paper-based registrations, please do make sure that you are erasing that information after 21 days. It is really important. If you keep it for 22 days, you are actually in effect in breach of GDPR because you can only keep it for the length of time specified, and the whole process is to keep the data for 21 days. So please make sure you have a process in place to shred, delete, whatever it might be, that information. We've heard of some places that where they have somebody who is a regular attendee, they're holding on to their information as a regular attendee. Really, you don't have the permission to do that under the test and trace situation. So it should be that actually they register each time. There is no reason though why they perhaps have to fill in all of the details as fully if you know who they are, because it's you that will be using that information to contact them. So if you know their name is Peter, there isn't any reason why they can't put P Jones so that you know who they are and you've got their contact details to hand. So we don't have to make this overly onerous, but we do have to make sure we have a record every time. Otherwise, you don't have your reason for contacting them. Well, not you, sorry, Test and Trace won't have their reason for contacting them if the date of the thing they last signed was 3 months ago. So it's really, really important that it's done as a fresh. But this, hopefully, this QR code out will actually mean people don't have to keep paper-based copies anymore. So that's a real positive. And of course, what you're also doing is encouraging people to have the app on their phone. Now, I know that some people, these kind of electronic systems can be contentious. People worry about the use of data. But as public servants, as people working in the civil society, this is the kind of thing that we're often encouraged to support in order to be able to help people to access services that we want them to access. The last thing I wanted to mention was just about furlough support. As we know, furlough is coming to an end at the end of October. We're expecting to get some guidance from the government in how companies are going to organise and deal with this in the future as a result of the scheme coming to an end. At the moment, we haven't heard anything. Sorry, I've just got something going on in the background. I'm sorry about that. We were hoping to get some guidance really towards the end of this month, but we will kind of have to wait and see. As soon as any new information around the furlough scheme comes to light, we will of course inform you of it. Just a couple of pointers though in the interim. If you are looking to bring furlough to an end, just remember to give notice in writing. Now, there is no minimum notice period to bring somebody back from furlough, but it is important that you give notice in writing. And it is also vitally important that you discuss that with the person that you're bringing back. A lot of people are expressing concerns about coming back into office environments and coming back into the working world. And I think the best way to deal with that is to actually talk to people. So don't just give notice in writing, although that's what you're legally required to do. Do make sure you're discussing with your staff to alleviate any concerns that they have. And there are some fantastic resources out there, some of which we shared last week as part of policy and procedure when it comes to staff returning. Do encourage staff to raise concerns. Don't be frightened of the things that people might be worried about, because actually if you find out what they are, you can normally put plans in place to prevent people becoming concerned. And then really just my final note on this really is just to remind people that you do need to keep the information around furloughing for 5 years. So any agreements that have been signed, make sure that you keep a copy of them with the person's name and the hours that they were furloughed for. And it's really important that that's kept somewhere safe, that it's labelled well and easy to find, and that that's kept securely for 5 years. There is some absolutely phenomenal resources on ACAS if you just look up ACAS and furloughing, and the links will be on this slideshow. And also the Job Centre resources, which a lot of small organisations don't access because they don't have to register with the Job Centre when they make people redundant. But it is really worth having a look at those, and we've got those linked on our website, and I'll make sure that link is on this slideshow. It's probably just worth mentioning before I hand you back to Anita that Rachel, who puts all of our things onto the website, who downloads our recording and makes it accessible to all of you, won't be back until Monday. And so all of this information won't be uploaded until Monday. But if you needed any of those links more urgently than that, then please use our inquiry form and we'll get the links to you. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Anita.
Brilliant. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm really conscious now that my I had a couple of thumbs up. Okay, so I am now also going to share my screen, and I'm going to talk about the surviving and thriving collaboration, mergers and partnerships. And we're talking about surviving and thriving in terms of your organisation, not in terms of our own personal health, but obviously we need to make sure we stay healthy and survive personally as well to help our organisations thrive and survive. So the reason for talking about this is that as we've I think we've said this every single week, but it has been a particularly difficult time. Organisations have been mothballed. Fundraising activities have been cancelled, postponed, curtailed, which is having a significant impact on how we operate and how and the future of our organisations. So one way of looking at sustainability, helping our organisations to survive and thrive, is looking at working together. Now, whether that's informally or through collaboration, or more formally through sort of partnerships and merger, this is something that I think we do as a sector do to some degree anyway. It's worth looking at. So I thought I'd just go through a couple of bits and pieces about working together. And as Paula says, these slides will be available after the weekend. If you're really, really keen on having them beforehand, then please get in touch. So there has been a lot of interest. There's been drivers for us to work together, from improving our chances in terms of funding applications, for example. And the other drivers have been about, trying to get us to be more effective and efficient and in the way we work. But the other reason that we start to look, or as organisations start looking to working together, is in times of crisis, and particularly the financial impact of COVID-19 may be one of those drivers that might make us think about how we can work together more effectively to make sure that we survive, grow, thrive, sustain what we do, the services that we do, for the benefit of our beneficiaries, and to avoid the sad fact that some organisations may actually disappear as a result of financial crisis. So working together, whatever form it should take, it should be for mutual advantage, and it should ultimately benefit our service users, those beneficiaries. Working together could be just for a short period of time, or it could be something that is more permanent in terms of a consortium, or a constituted way of working together, a joint venture, or through a merger. And so I thought I'd look at some of the pros and cons, and some of the different ways of looking at improving working relationships between organisations. And there is, I suppose the word of warning is that whatever relationship in any walk of life we enter into, all of them should be entered into with careful consideration. And we need to think about our beneficiaries' interests. They should be at the forefront of our thoughts about those relationships, working relationships between two organisations or more organisations. And also, if you're a registered charity, or then particularly looking at your charitable purposes, so any joint venture, any sort of joining together or working together should also be for the furtherance of your charitable objects, as well as in your beneficiaries' best interests. So what are the concerns that you might have about working with another organisation? As we have you may have noticed, we don't have the wonderful Ray with us today, but hopefully so we're going to try something slightly different. It may not work, but it's a bit of learning for all of us, which is never a bad thing. If you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, then hopefully you should come up with an annotate, which is like a little pencil button like tool. If you click on that, you'll get a toolbar at the top, and if you then select text mode, you can then write what your concern is. So my concern is about loss of identity. Oh, it'd be helpful if I could spell. And now hopefully when I click out of that, you'll all be able to see that. So I thought, just quickly, it may or may not work. If you're able to do that, could you just, sorry.
Some people might find that the annotate thing is at the top of the screen, where it says you are viewing Anita Hanson's screen in green. Behind, next to that, you've got view options. If you use that drop down menu, you'll find annotate there.
Okay, brilliant. So do you want to have a go? If it works, it's fantastic. If it doesn't work, it doesn't really matter. We haven't lost anything. But it's a nice bit of learning of how to use Zoom and do something different with Zoom. So if anybody is able to share what their concerns may be when you start thinking about working with another organisation, please use the annotate tool. And we'll try and do that. So I'm hoping that somebody's gonna, yeah, you lost control, brilliant. And what I can do is I can save this and we can share this. Rule of up to 6, okay? Excellent. Being taken over. Have conflict of interest, yeah. They're all worthwhile, obviously all concerns that we need to think about. Any more for any more? You have to click outside of your text box for it to come up if you are. It's a good thing. Physical distance. Oh, it can be a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. It can be a good thing. And we're going to look at that in a minute. Loss of funding for our group. Okay. Yeah, there can be red tape depending on how you enter into it. Take on their responsibilities. Okay. Difference of aims, yeah. Additional restrictions and controls. Complicated decision making. These are all reasons where we need to enter into any sort of working relationship with eyes open, and to have those open and frank conversations at the beginning. So I'm going to save that, and then we can make sure we share that later on, and I'm going to move on with my slides. So you can don't have to worry about any more sharing, but thank you for being involved in that. So that's the other thing I need to do. See, we're all learning still, aren't we? I need to stop the annotate. I need to clear the screen before I can move on, or otherwise our lovely things will be there forevermore. So it's all a steep learning curve. So some of the benefits of working together can be, depending on who you're working with, it can lead to it can lead to an increased presence, and greater awareness of you. So you partner with a larger organisation, it can mean that you can benefit from the awareness of them, and it can also help you extend your reach, both geographically, but also in terms of maybe the service unit users or the beneficiaries. It hopefully would lead to improved services, and that would be something that the reason for entering into a working relationship is about, improvements or developments, or sustain and preventing closure, but you'd hope to see some sort of benefit as a result of that working relationship. By working with other organisations, you can benefit, and your staff and volunteers can benefit from transfer of knowledge and skills, learning how to do something differently or developing your own knowledge base. It can help you share risks, improve income opportunities. We've seen with funders is a greater interest and sometimes call for partnership applications. It can improve management and governance by, again, a smaller organisation might benefit from partnering with a larger organisation and having access to better quality policies and procedures. Not necessarily, but that could be one of the outcomes. And just sort of management practices. So again, part of that sharing skills and knowledge. And hopefully it would lead to improved outcomes for the beneficiaries. But yes, as you have identified, there are some concerns. Loss of identity is a big one. You could be, again, if you're a small organisation partnering with a larger organisation or a better known organisation, there's always that fear that you may not lose your identity, that you may be swamped by the larger beast, as it were. And again, something that's very key to third sector or voluntary and community organisations is the culture and the value of that organisation. And it's very important to us as a sector to be able to preserve and maintain our culture. And that's sort of sometimes what sets us apart from sort of more private sector business type organisations. There's always huge discussion about what the name and how the name of this new partnership, what the name's going to be, how that's going to be reflected, and how it's going to be reflected in branding. And I think that slightly comes from the concerns that we might have about loss of identity. There is likely impact on staff and volunteers. Going down the more formal merger option or joint venture, it can sometimes lead to redundancies or loss of staff, because actually if you are merging, there can be a doubling up, and that's not really going to save you anything in terms of costs. And the last one is that there is a risk to working with another organisation. Those, because of the bureaucracy or coming together with those agreements, it does take time, and there can be additional costs, which is why actually none of this can be done lightly. And I listened to a webinar the other day, and they were talking about actually the best sort of working relationships are those that take time and are planned, and have those times for those conversations and discussions, and often those that are done at a time of crisis, maybe not so widely beneficial. I think I've already said this, but whatever the driver for considering working together, you need to bear in mind your organisational purpose. So the reason that the reason for you being, the reason that's written down in your constitution, and also the outcomes for your beneficiaries, and that they should be done in any decision should be done in the best interest of your beneficiaries. And really that should be the underlying principle, not in both in terms of choosing who you partner with, but also entering into those agreements. It shouldn't necessarily, finance shouldn't be the driver. So there's a collaboration spectrum, so the steps are, and there are ones in between, but starting off with an informal network, which is the looser and quickest way of setting up, to having sort of a lead agency or accountable body sort of set up, to something that is constituted, so as a separate entity, which could be a consortium or a joint venture, which is having something separately set up, but the two independent organisations still be in existence, or then lastly, a more formal merger. And with each, there are pros and cons. So an informal network, it is very quick and easy to set up. It's just people coming together because they have a common purpose or a common thread that makes sense for them to do some things together. But the benefits are you stay independent, you have that flexibility, and you might have the ability to take the lead on different aspects where your strengths lie. But there is no legal entity for funders to contract with, so it's not a recognised entity, so you may not be able to get funding, and it's based on the goodwill of the members, which can sometimes fall down. Change of personality, change of personnel could result in that informal network not being as effective as it was initially when set up, or things change. So my advice would be to have some simple terms of reference or a simple memorandum of understanding, that's what MOU is, that could help the workings of your group and set out the roles and responsibilities at the beginning, so it's clear exactly why the group is set up and who's involved and what you want to achieve. And moving on, lead agency. So this is the next step up, and then basically it's where one organisation becomes a lead body, and that enables you to start bidding for contracts and funding because they take on the risk and the responsibility for those applications. It also means there's a bit more of a proven track record, because that hopefully that lead partner is somebody that's been in existence, and hopefully that lead partner will also have policies and procedures in place. Now this could be the role of if you have a development agency. Sorry, I've just forgotten the, but in parts of Dorset there are development trusts, and this would be one of the roles that development trust would provide. They would support smaller organisations and provide some of those functions to help projects and those smaller organisations get off the ground and run. But obviously the risk is to that lead partner, because they bear the risks and the costs of that sort of position. And there's also a risk that if you're developing a project, that lead partner could bring that all in-house and benefit themselves. So again, having an agreement in place would be one way of avoiding that. Then it's about the next two steps are really about sort of legalising and setting something up. So setting up a legal entity with a membership structure where the members have control. It provides, I suppose, a bit more of a level playing field, equality across the membership, where it's not down to one organisation, maybe because they're taking on the risk, maybe having more weight in the discussions. It's about spreading the risk, but also the decision making and the benefits. So it does, and also this way that you have collective bargaining power, and also there's also a single point of access for commissioners and funders, so to have that contact with and build that relationship with. If you're just setting it up, the downsides are there's no proven record, so no track record. You're then supporting a whole new organisation, so there are the additional administration and reporting costs of setting up something that is a legal entity in its own right, which would also require time and funds to set up. And then the last thing that I'm going to look at is a merger, and that's actually where two organisations come together to be one single entity. It has lots of the benefits of being a legal entity, so being able to apply for funds. It prevents duplication, it can create efficiencies. You have the potential for larger contracts because you're a larger single organisation rather than the component parts. And so some of those benefits that we mentioned right at the beginning. But there are obviously, again, some downsides to it. Depending on how it's managed, it can be an unpleasant experience, and it can be time consuming and costly. But those things can be, if they're managed well, it can be beneficial for everyone, and it can mean that the service to your beneficiaries is sustained and you prevent closure, which would be a more positive outcome, particularly as a result of crisis. So that's really my whistle-stop tour of those sorts of different models, I suppose, for working together. My top tips: being clear, why are you actually considering coming together, and looking for organisations that have a similar value, culture and purpose, so that it's a coming together rather than trying to shoehorn something that would work. And so obviously it's got to be mutually agreeable to all the parties involved. Consider and be clear about what the longer term impact is, the added value that you're going to bring to your beneficiaries and to your organisation, and that wider social value. So again, impact on your communities that you're supporting. If you can, if it's not a crisis situation, taking time, consulting people and involving staff, volunteers, key stakeholders can help with the process. It's really important to listen and to communicate, to hear what those other partners want to get out of it, and what their concerns are, and to work through those, to end up with something that is fair and transparent. And this is in an ideal world, and if you are at risk of closure, then sometimes these things might not be able to happen in the best way. But I guess this is, if you in the best case scenario, and then the idea, the best practice would be to be open, clear and transparent, and make sure you've got the time and energy to invest in that sort of development of that partnership arrangement, but also the ongoing running of it. And I think I'm going to, so this is my last slide, and then I'm going to hand over to Julie. There are some links. The webinar from NCVO and Bates Wells and Cass Business School is well worth a listen to. It's about just over an hour long, so not a huge investment. And then there are obviously guidance from NCVO and the Charity Commission. The Charity Commission has a due diligence and 20 questions for trustees to ask, which is really helpful sort of checklist to go through if you're thinking about merging. But if you're thinking about any sort of joint venture or coming together in a sort of, I suppose, more in a more formal capacity, then again, those questions would be worthwhile having a look through and going through as a trustee board. I am going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Julie. Hopefully that was okay for everyone. If anybody's got any questions, then just come through to one of the DCA advisors. And
hello everyone. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about sustainable funding for your organisation post-COVID, really. Where do you go from here? So there are still a few emergency COVID funds around, but some grant funders are slowly starting to change their priorities now and looking ahead. For example, Tesco's Bags of Help. During October, November and December this year, the grant scheme will provide grants of up to £1,000 to support projects focused on local children and young people. So things are slowly starting to change, and you really need to be aware of this and ready for this change. So if you've already received COVID emergency funding, you should be looking ahead to new funding streams. This may mean, though, that you need to review your priorities, because as the way you've operated post-COVID may have changed. So where do you start? Really, you need to start with a business plan. Review your business plan, and if you haven't got one, you should write one. This is really important with this. If you do need any help writing a business plan, please do get in touch. It's a valuable working document that will clearly identify so what your group does, that's your mission, what your project will achieve, that's your aims, what activities, systems, skills and resources are needed to achieve these, so that's your objectives, and to use these facts and figures from your feasibility study, market research and funding strategy. Make sure it's written by the team of people involved in the project, and keep it short and avoid jargon if you can. So as part of a business plan, I mentioned the funding strategy. This is a really important way to look ahead to see where you're going. This dictates how your organisation would generate funds in the short, medium and long term. It should form an integral part of your business plan and be formed around your organisation's vision and mission. So it will help you plan what resources you need. It will help you identify funding streams and which funding streams to explore and develop, and which tasks to designate to different teams of people, your volunteers or your staff. But most importantly, share your strategy with stakeholders, trustees, funders and patrons. If they like what you're doing, they may well offer you support. Community consultation, this is really also very important, particularly coming out of COVID. If it has changed the way you work and the community you work in, you should really consider carrying out a community consultation. By asking your local community their wants and needs, you can demonstrate evidence of need in any funding applications. So what is the consultation? It is a two-way communication process that provides people, stakeholders and communities an opportunity to discuss their needs, share their views and influence decisions which affect them. So why should you consult? Well, this shows that you're listening to the community's needs and you can plan your project or services according to their needs. These opinions will influence how a service or project is planned and delivered. It can help you generate ideas for developing or improving services and test options for changes to services. It may help you improve the delivery and take up of your service too. A consultation provides valuable evidence that your project or service is needed. It's critical to developing your business plan and applying for funding. Some funders expect you to have done a community consultation. A consultation may also help you raise awareness of an issue or encourage people to get involved. It may help gain greater ownership of a product or a service. So Dorset Community Action can help with your community consultation, and Anita's looking into some exciting new packages. So I'm going to hand back just for a little minute so Anita can tell you more about it.
Thanks, Julie. So it really is, it's just something we're aware that actually community consultation is something that funders really like. They like to see that the community is involved and consulted, not and needs are reflected, so it informs evidence of need. So DCA has been thinking about this, and we're looking at developing an offer, a service where, because we have SurveyMonkey, we could develop and host a questionnaire for your organisation that would enable you then to consult your communities and find out how COVID-19 has impacted on them, so that then you could then use the results in any future funding applications. So, for example, you might like to find out whether how it's impacted a particular proportion or a particular part of your community, say for older people or younger people, depending on what your needs are. And what we're offering is a questionnaire that will be suited to your needs, and then the results. And then depending on what results you are, we're looking at maybe having different, we are looking, there's no maybe about it, we're looking at maybe just, keep on saying maybe, we are looking at either providing you with the results that you can then use, or we can then look at segmenting those results so you can drill down a little bit to find out whether some particular parts of the community or groups within your community have been more specifically impacted, or their needs are slightly different to everyone else's. And then basically that's what we're offering. If you are interested in finding out more, then please, in the chat, you're all brilliant at using the chat now, please write yes I'm interested and your email address, and what I will do is, following today, follow it up with an email and just explain a little bit more about what we're proposing and find out whether that is of interest to you. Hopefully I've explained that pretty well. I'm going to hand back to Julie before I say maybe again.
Thanks, Anita. I think it described that very well. So during that, Anita mentioned evidence of need, and this is something that's really important. This is what's going to come out of your community consultation, and support any funding applications, support your business plan and any funding applications that you put together. So why is providing evidence of need important? It's gathering evidence ensures you focus on real rather than perceived need, identifies the number, characteristics and location of the beneficiaries, what is currently in place to address the needs, and where there are gaps in provision. So a robust evidence of need explains to others why your organisation exists. It's a key component to your project or business plan. Funding applications can be a useful communication tool for attracting trustees, volunteers and other supporters to your project and organisation. A lack of evidence is a common reason for rejecting a funding application. So, it is very important. So there's your business plan. There's your, which is got full of evidence of need and who you're working with and what your aims and objectives are. You may find that you need to look at diversifying your income streams just to open up any other opportunities. So why should you diversify your income streams? It will give you more security, so all your eggs aren't in one basket. It could help you secure future finances, and you can focus on longer-term strategies for a greater impact as well. So there are 5 steps of diversification. We've all heard of SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Again, this is going to form part of your business plan as well. So it's all stuff that's going to be interconnected. So number 1 of the 5 steps is look internally. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your organisation? Number 2, look externally. What are your opportunities and threats? Consider threats such as political, environmental or technological. Now we've got one more to add on to the list now, haven't we? We've got pandemic. So, there's another one for us to consider. Who competes with you for funds? Where do they get their funding? And going back to Anita's presentation, could you collaborate or merge? Going through these steps, it will help you identify any possible options. So number 3, consider all the possible funding sources. These are major sources of income, voluntary, statutory or earned. And number 4, consider who you know. Identify different people and groups you come into contact with on a regular basis. This is why it's really good idea to have your funding strategy up together and your business plan, because you've got all your information there just to show any potential funders. So who do you know? Identify different people and groups you come into contact with on a regular basis. Think about what they can offer your organisation, such as expertise, contacts, influence or donations. Doesn't necessarily need to be financial support. Think about why they would be interested in your organisation and what motivates them. Identify the connections between them and you. And finally, number 5, set your SMART objectives and think tactics. Produce your plan for the year. What do you want to achieve? Your SMART objectives will be specific, measurable, accountable, realistic and timed. Accountable, think about who's responsible for this. The better chance you have of becoming sustainable. We will be offering some training, Anita will be, so that's next Wednesday, and it's an introduction to successful bid writing. So this will be bringing pretty much all together what we've been talking about today, and hopefully how to achieve better success rates with your funding bids. So that's me done. Thank you.
Okay, back to me. So the last bit of this morning's webinar is, as we quite often do, is to share a sort of a funding update. So I am, in the last 5 minutes or so, just give you a whistle-stop tour of funds that are available. So again, excuse me, I'm going to share my screen. We just go on from that. So I've said this every week, it would be wrong of me not to say it, but the Dorset Council Community Impact Fund closes on Sunday. I've seen a few more come in, which has been fantastic, thank you. I certainly hope to see lots more before Sunday. I've said this every week, so I'm not going to say any more, but just apply. Oh gosh, there's a spelling mistake in the next one. Disabled People's Organisations. So this is an COVID emergency fund for organisations that are grassroots. So they're aimed at supporting disabled people. And as it says there, there's two webinars coming up if you're interested about applying to this, and there's grants of up to £25,000 available. Disabled groups are one of the groups that have been particularly hit, as are the next group, the LGBTQ+ community. So again, there's a grant of up to £15,000 available for grassroots groups and that support LGBTQ+ communities. 2 grant programs, micro and small, which closes on the 22nd, and then medium and large, which closes on the 30th. So if you're an organisation that supports those groups or are looking to develop or expand into supporting those groups, then there could be funds to help you do that. But they have to be in response or related to the impact of COVID-19. Scottish Power, this is quite a large sum. If you're lucky, you could apply up to you could get up to £200,000. Covers quite a wide range of sort of project areas, from education, environmental, arts, culture, heritage, and community development. So most of the groups, and particularly village halls, if you're doing work around developing your community, supporting your community citizenship, then you could potentially look at that grant. Cook's Charity, I've included this because I know that there are a lot of groups out there that are supporting vulnerable people and communities with food, and this is a grant that supports those sorts of groups that are looking at developing cookery skills or addressing food insecurities, which is another area that particularly public health are interested in at the moment. As it says, the majority of the grants are awarded for educational projects. So it's about upskilling or raising awareness. So it could be like an allotment project, and definitely worthwhile having a look at their website if you're anything to do with food. And there is there's no guidance about upper limits or application deadlines, so you can apply at any time, and it looks like you can apply for any amount, obviously reasonable. And then Bailey Thomas, it's a small grant programme, but so under £10,000 or over £10,000, but it's not, you know, up to the hundreds of thousands, but it's about those with learning difficulties, and it's sort of severe learning difficulties, so autism and some of those more, I'm losing my words this morning, sorry, more severe learning difficulties. And so anyway, 1st of December is that one, and the projects can benefit children and or adults, so a wide range of people that can be supported. I've never heard of a KFC Foundation before. This was a new one for me. It doesn't surprise me, given that we do see lots of food outlets and like high street vendors offering community grants. So I thought I'd share this. Your organisation has to be close. So in the location of a KFC outlet, I know that there's one in Bournemouth, not that I go, but I'm sure there might be one or two others around the county. Small grants, 25th of September, for an expression of interest, which means that there's a two-stage process. So if your expression of interest is accepted, then you're invited back to apply for the full amount. And then this is one, we don't feature these very often because they don't have websites, but actually there are quite a few foundations and grant giving trusts that don't have websites. They only give relatively small amounts of funds out, but they're well worth a go because they don't have websites. And because we live in this society where everything's done via Google, then I don't know, maybe I hope that the applications are slightly less oversubscribed because they're slightly less accessible. So these are grants for between £500 and £5,000. I've highlighted it because it says a wide range of charitable causes, mainly in Dorset and Hampshire. So we are Dorset. So this is definitely one that if you didn't know about it, then perhaps you should have a little look at it. One way of looking at it is by searching them on the charity register, where you can find out more about their accounts, read their accounts to see the types of projects that they've funded in the past and the amounts that they've given out, because that gives you an indication as to where their preferences may be or where their thinking is. And that's the address and phone number if you want to find out a little bit more or stick in an application. It's basically a letter that they're looking for. And that is the end of the whistle stop for available funding. There will obviously be more in the funding alert that will be sent out later this week. I think before we go, the final thing is to say that there has been a bit in the news about Dorset schools, increasing cases of COVID-19 in Dorset schools, and some publicity around year groups or school closures. And we have seen the number of cases in Dorset begin to rise, but they're still much lower than the rest of the county. Oh, the rest of the county? No, rest of the country. So it's just a point of awareness that cases are rising, schools additional measures are being taken. And if you are from one of the COVID sort of community groups, emergency groups that was started up at the beginning of this process, or you know someone that was involved in one of those groups, it's maybe just to raise awareness that that things are changing. There's nothing to be worried about or to be overly concerned about. But if it continues to, and we're nowhere near a lockdown like in the north of the country and Birmingham, nowhere near that. But if things do start to continue to rise or change, then it is obviously it's something that the authorities are keeping a watch on, and just to be aware that you, as a community group, you may be being contacted again. I've noticed that Paula's just come unmuted, so I wonder if she just wanted to say a couple of words on that.
Thank you, Anita. Well, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to the team. I think I learned quite a lot actually about mergers and collaboration. I thought I knew quite a bit to start with, so that's really excellent. Thank you, guys. As always, we are here to offer support and advice, so if there's anything about today that you want to get in touch with us about, there is additional support that we can always offer. And really just to highlight that final point that Anita was making, that for a lot of the COVID response community groups, there has been a feeling that job is done, and that actually it might be time to disband or step down. And I understand why groups might feel that, particularly the incredible amount of work people have put in, furlough coming to an end and maybe returning back to jobs and seeing a drop in volunteer availability. But what I would say is that we are still in the throes of a pandemic. We don't quite know what Dorset is going to look like. So we would ask that people get in contact with us or the volunteer centre to talk through strategies to keep you going so that you're there for the future. There's going to be a bit of a ring round that's going to go on to COVID-19 response groups that are registered with ourselves and with the volunteer centre to make sure that you have all the support that you need, whether that is looking at formalising your organisation or whether it's just looking at being able to stand down but be ready to stand up again if need be. So we will be in contact to speak to groups about that, but don't hesitate to use our helpline or our inquiries app. So I'm going to hand back to Anita just to say goodbye and thank you once again. And next week, of course, is going to be slightly different because it's going to be our training session, which you can register for on Eventbrite. And then the Wednesday after that will be a network event hosted by the lovely Julie. And then we'll move back into our first Wednesday of the month webinar as of October. So I will look forward to seeing you at those other events. But if I don't see you till the next Wednesday webinar on the first Wednesday of October, then I look forward to seeing you then. I'll just hand back to Anita to say bye.
Thanks, Paula. I haven't really got anything to say. I think Paula's done it all brilliantly. So hopefully I'll see some of you. There are still places on the training course next week. Hopefully I'll see some of you next week. Or if you want to find out more, then please email me and I can give you some information about what the course is going to cover. And then, yes, and then Julie. So thank you very much for this morning. As I say, all of the presentation slides and recording will be posted on Monday because Ray's taking a bit of time off. If you're desperate in the meantime, then please do get in contact and we can send the slides through. But thank you very much. Nice to see so many of you and see you all soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Stay healthy.